Hi class, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how do we multiply matrices. The previous video we learned if we can multiply matrices. We did a lovely compatibility test as I kept calling it. And today we're actually going to go through the process of matching up and multiplying. But before we do that, I promised I would put the answers to the questions I asked you to try yesterday. Again, yesterday, just a little recap. We have found the size of the first matrix, the size of the second matrix, and the middles of them, the columns of the first one and the rows of the second one had to be compatible. If they are compatible, then you can multiply the matrices, and the resulting matrix would be the size of the rows of the first and the columns of the second, 2 by 2. So, for number 1, 2, 3, 4, we got a nice little pattern of a 2 by 2 matrix. Notice these lovely square matrices gave me the exact same size matrix when multiply. Now, they don't have to be squares, but when they are squares, they are equal. All right, this one worked out, this one worked out, this one worked out. The only one not compatible was number 8. It did not exist. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to actually do the multiplying, okay? Ooh, I like this one. This one says matrix multiplication is not commutative. That means order matters. It's very important that we know that order matters, which we'll stress when we teach you some some other things that we're going to teach you, like on a calculator, but not today. Today we're doing by hand because you need to be able to do it by hand. All right, now, if we know we can multiply, now that we know if we can, how do we actually multiply the matrices? So I have an example here, and I stuck with a square matrix because I love square matrices. They just make my life nice and easy. And if I look here, this first guy is a 2 by 2 matrix, and the second guy is a 2 by 2 matrix, which means their ultimate answer will be nice and compatible. Woo. It'll be a 2 by 2 matrix. So I'm just going to do this. Sometimes I have lots of room to do this. Sometimes I don't, but I hope I do. I know that I'm going to have 2 rows and 2 columns. So there'll be ultimately 4 entries. Okay. Now, the way that this is going to work, is I am going to be using all rows from the first guy. This row, and I'm going to change it to another color. Let's make it yellow. That was kind of hard to see. I'm glad I made it so light. And I'm going to be using all columns from this guy. Okay? So, in the first, I have row 1. And I have, I don't want to use this yellow. I wish I could switch. Let's use pink there. I don't want to use pink there, so let's use brown. Row 2. And over here, I have column 1 and column 2. What I'm going to do is whatever the entry location is kind of how I'm going to be matching them up. Now remember I called this a compatibility test? That's just like something I think of in my head. This is compatible, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set each row up with each column. So here I'm going to be setting up, I'll do this in gray, row 1 with column 1. And here, so this is row 1, column 1. I'm going to set up row 1 with column 2. And right here, I'm going to set up row 2 with column 1. Oops. And right here, row 2, column 2. So I'm going to make this guy really big so I can kind of explain it in a better way, if you will. 2, 3, 4. Everybody still agree I have a 2 by 2 matrix because 2 and 2, they're compatible. 2 and 2 are the leftover answers. So I'm going to take in this first position, like I said, row 1, column 1, and I'm going to take this green guy and this pink guy, and I'm going to match them up. And if you notice, he has 2 entries and he has 2 entries, which is why it's really important that these match so everybody has somebody to pair up with. So I'm going to take 0 and I'm going to pair it with 6. And I'm going to take 2 and pair it with 3. Now when they pair up, they multiply, and then to get my final entry, I add them. This should remind you of dot product. And if it doesn't, don't worry. You're just going to pair up, multiply, add the couples, okay? So over here, I'm going to continue row 1, column 2. Row 1, column 2. So I'm going to take the numbers from row 1, 0 and 2. Now I'm going to pair it with column 2 numbers. Column 2 is orange, so I'm switching to orange. 0 and 2 are going to come over here, and 0 is first as negative 6 is first. And then 2 is second, and if I put 2 with the second guy, it would be 0. And in between them, in between the couples, I put a plus. So take a minute, make sure you understand how I did that. Now, if you notice, the rows repeated because I did all of row 1. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do row 2 with column 1. So I'm going to take the negative 2 and the negative 5 and match it with the 6 and the 3. So I'm going to take negative 2 and negative 5, and I'm going to match them with column 1, which are the pinks, 6 and 3. Now look, my column numbers repeated. Here my greens repeated. Here my pinks will repeat. This way the browns will repeat, and this way the oranges will repeat because I think the colors kind of help me out a little bit. So I'm going to put a plus right there. Okay. And the last entry is row 2, column 2. So here would be row 1, here would be row 2, and it meets up with column 2. So I'm going to do negative 2 and negative 5 again. And I'm going to pair them up with negative 6 and 0. And I add them. Okay. Now this is a lot of work for 4 answers, but this is how you get those 4 answers. So here I have 0 times 6, which is 0, and 2 times 3, which is 6. 0 plus 6 is simply 6. 0 times negative 6 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0, so this second entry is 0. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12, and negative 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. If I add those up, I get negative 27. Don't get worried. You're like, oh, it's a big number. It doesn't matter. It's the right math. We're fine. Negative 2 times negative 6 is 12. Negative 5 times 0 is 0. 12 plus 0 is 12. Whoo! I understand that this is intimidating. It's a lot going on, but it's all about using the row numbers from the first column and from the first matrix and the column numbers from the second matrix. That's the biggest thing. If you can get to this point, we're good, and then should be the easy jump. So let's try another one because we need to practice. The more practice, the better we'll do. All right, so in this second example I have for you guys, I have 1, 2 rows and 1, 2, 3 columns. In this one, I have 1, 2, 3 rows and 1, 2 columns. Compatibility test passes. Ultimately, my answer is going to be a 2 by 2. That's just coincidence, since I'm not always a 2 by 2, just coincidence from the first one. So when I look at this, I'm going to have 2 rows, 1, 2, and 2 columns. There'll be 4 entries. Okay. At this point, I like to make the big old workspace for myself so I can kind of see what's going on. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this spot here, I'm going to have row 1, column 1. And here, right here at this point, I'm going to have row 1, column 2. Here is row 2, column 1, column 2. All right, so now I'm going to, again, only use the row 1 numbers from him. He has all the rows. So I'm going to be using the 6, the 2, and the -5. And I'm going to match them up with the column 1 numbers, which are for -4 and 1. And once I pair up, I sum up. All right, once you pair up, you sum up. You add them all together. If you want, you can add now, or you can just make sure that, hey, I'm reusing row 1 here. Hey, I'm reusing column 1 here. Here I'm using row 2, column 2 entries. So now, all these color coding, I hope they're not confusing. I don't want to be confusing. I'll stick with this color here. Row 2 numbers are there. Column 2 numbers are here. So here I want to use R1C2. R1 is 6 to -5. So I'm going to reuse that 6 and that 2 and that -5. But now I'm using C2. C2 is going to be times -3 times 2 and times -1. And in between them I put adding. So now I'm going to go to row 2 numbers, which are 3, -2, -1. 3, -2, -1. And column 1 numbers. Column 1 are 4, -4, and 1. 4, -4, and 1. So I'm going to take these values and add them up. And my last setup is going to be row 2. Row 2 numbers are 3, -2, -1, and I'm going to use column 2 numbers, which are -3, 2, and -1 again. And in between them, you always add, always add. Okay, so my final step is just the math. You're like, oh, I hope I got all these numbers right. So this is 24, -8, and -5. This will be -13 plus that will be 11. This is -18. 2 and 2 is 4. -5 and 1 is 5. And when I add those up, I get negative because an 18 is larger. 9. Here I have -12, 8, and -1. So this will be -5 and -9, -4, 1 will give me -12. You guys try example 3, and on the next video, I'll have the answer to that one, and we'll have more practice. Good luck.